Hello to everybody. Hey guys, hope you are good. It's actually very nice to see so many of you here, and I was just going through the list, and it's great to see some former students, some actual students, even some future students. So it's great to see you guys. Thank you very much for finding time. As you have seen, the webinar is going to be about data analytics, and it's going to be with our new professor in a module which is actually called data analytics. So I'm going to give the floor to Luca. But before I will do it, just guys, one important thing. Some of you are already doing it. You have found the idea of using the chat, which is very good. Hello to all of you. You have also the part of questions. So feel free to ask some questions. Feel free to post some things. Once Luca will finish his session, we will go through the Q&As and we will just try to reply on those. Hope this makes sense, because once Luca will start with his session, we won't be able we are not going to stop him, and we are not going to interrupt him. So without any further delays, it's my pleasure to give the floor to Luca, and thank him very much for finding time in his very specific and difficult times to do this session with you. So Luca, all yours. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Lucas, and welcome everyone to this session today. We will spend approximately 1 hour together to do a very basic understanding of what sports can learn from other industries when it comes to technology and data analytics specifically. So let me go through a quick agenda, and then we get into the topics. I've been working on analytics my entire career, so now it's nearly 13 years, going for 14. And I've been working with different industries, and of course, I have been exposed to the way that companies take decisions by using data and the digital transformation, as it's called today. So we will see how non-sports industries are treating data today and what they do with it. Then we will do the same analysis looking at the sports industry specifically, and then we do a bit of a comparison. As a bonus content for the end of the presentation, I will also be discussing with you about the possibility of using data also for non-professional athletes. So if you want to play with data and do some analytics at home for ourselves. So this is just again a quick introduction. As I said, I'm not going to go into technical details today. If I speak anything that sounds technical to you, just let me know. But what I really want you to bring home today is understanding how much already exists in the world of other industry when it comes to data that sports can learn from, and what is exactly that sports does differently when it comes to the utilization of data and in which areas exactly. So when it comes to the data in general, today we hear a lot about it, right? We hear a lot about data management, big data, it's everywhere, data lakes, all these jargons are in there, and all those are out in the market because if we look at the latest years, 90% of the data has been produced, right, in the last 2-3 years. So it means that the usage of data that is being done by the community, by the world, is much bigger than what it was before. This is because the level of education of people is increasing. This is because the technology now is at the hands of everyone, and because we try to do everything by using technology in every moment of our day. Okay. I will leave you with those KPIs. You can see later the slides also in a recorded version. But just think about how much data you produce every time you use your applications on your phone, or when you use your wearable devices like smartwatches, or when you're at work, right, sending emails or creating things online. So how is data used by non-sports industries, and what do they do with it? This is the most important, interesting piece of the presentation today, because we need to immediately say that other industries have been using data forever. If we look at telco companies, for example, here I have some text. They've been using data to study what happens with their antennas. They use databases to look at what their customers are doing, to make sure that the experience of the customers is the best that they can offer. They are using data also to monitor when we pass with the car through toll gates, through what it's called machines to machines, right? So a machine that sends a message to another machine. Oil and gas is using data to monitor the production, so how much oil they are extracting or in the refinery, or how many people they are hiring, or the maintenance of their plants. Retail companies, for example, are using data to mix, again, what their customers show as preferences versus what they sell, for example. And here in this slide, we have a quick example that I've done with Clariba for a fashion brand, where we were using data to monitor the footfall into a specific shop. So using smart cameras, we were looking at where the customers were walking and which areas they were stopping the most versus what they were buying at the end. Why am I using this specific example? Because later we will see that this applies very much to football when it comes to video analysis, right? Airlines, for example, they have real-time analytics on the engines of the airplanes. They make sure that they do work and predictions to make sure that the airplanes can fly and not stay on the ground, because every time a plane stays on the ground, of course. Same are doing the hotels, for example, right? To make sure that they have the right room occupancy, the right rates offered to the customers depending on season, that their food and beverage is right, that the cleansing of the rooms is on point, and so far, so forth. So if we try to mix this then with sports, you can start to try making some connections. You know, customers are usually fans, and the employees are either the players or the back office. So how do we treat data? Usually we are looking at data as the final product, right? We open our applications, and for example, if I open Runtastic, it will tell me how much I was running, right? Or what was my average speed. But data comes from data sources normally when we talk about businesses, and it's not only one. In the previous slides, and I didn't mention, we have data that comes from different type of systems, right? Transactional systems like ERPs that have all the data that happens in the back office of companies, like, you know, procurement processes, HR processes, or production. We have data that comes from sensors, data that comes from social media. So all this type of data is what we call data sources, right? Because it's where data gets populated at the raw level. Once we have the data populated at the raw level, we can then start doing some integrations. So imagine if you are a company that wants to understand how much they're selling per employee, right? This kind of KPI comes from two places. How much you're selling comes from the ERP or from the sales database, and the number of employees comes from HR database. So if you want to mix those two things, you need to be able to find a connection between the two areas and integrate the data in what it's called either data lake or data warehouse or data hub. Okay. Once this data has reached this stage, then it's ready to be processed. What does it mean? It means that if we want to start looking at some predictive algorithms and prepare the KPIs for the visualization, this is where we do it. So imagine if we have, I go quickly to sport, but imagine if we have a player that has been training, so training database, the player that has been playing a match, so you have the match plus the player that has been at the doctor, so you have three different information that gets mixed, and if you put it together, you can do a prediction of injuries, for example. In normal businesses, what happens is that if you look at a plant of manufacturing, you can look at different aspects of the plants and start predicting when a certain piece has to be changed, right? Because maybe it's reaching end of life. So if you do it and you predict it, you avoid the breaking in the line and maybe higher cost to then fix it, right? So preventing is always better than fixing, and data helps on this. And then at the end, there is the activity, right? So we need to act once we see data. Nowadays, we hear a lot about companies that want to be data-driven. So it means that once we prepare our data, and we need to visualize it in a proper way and take actions based on this. Some actions are assisted, so coming from machine learning. Some actions are decided by the end user, which understands the business, can read the data, and take a decision on it. What I've done is, for today, was dividing the type of data into four different main categories. So processes, transactions, then I put customers specifically, and performance. I wanted to quickly go through the processes and think about what happens in company from end-to-end point of view, like hiring a new person, right? It's not just like going in the market and getting a curriculum and hiring someone, but there is a specific process which has approvals, which has different people reviewing, different people interviewing until we hire someone. Then I put the transactions, which is the lowest level of granularity of data, right? For example, is asking for vacation. It's just pressing a button, right? I say I want to go from vacation from day A to day B. I send it, and this is a transaction that happens. Of course, then there are other transactions that would build a process, like vacation approval process. Then I put here the customers, because every business has to work for customers, right? No matter what we do, we are always selling to someone or providing a service to someone. And businesses are always divided into B2B, so business to business, or B2C, which is business to consumer. And once those are understood, then the way that we treat data to better support our customers changes a lot. Why? Because when we are selling to people, we need to understand, for example, which are their habits, which are their preferences as individuals. And when we speak with businesses, we need to understand a bit more of what's their strategy and preferences as organization rather than individual, even though individual level has always an impact. And then the performance. This is where the data gets a meaning, right? Because whatever we have discussed before is just numbers if we don't put a target against it. So it's important that when we say that we have that we want to hire someone in a company, we also have to put a deadline, for example. This way we can measure the performance. So if a company says, I want to hire in 2 months, then 2 months becomes our target. And if we are 2 months and 3 days, then we have passed it. And this can get measured against our performance. I went into more detail. So again, when it comes to the life cycle, and here I wanted to bring you a realistic example, and maybe many of you know already, is that when you want to get hired by a company, there are so many steps that happen in there, and some of them are even done by non-human processes. So as soon as we send our curriculum to a company nowadays, this gets it's read by an applicant tracking system, what it's called ATS, that does the first scan of our curriculum, mixing the words with the job description. Again, it seems that data is nowhere, but when we write a curriculum in Word, this is data, and data gets compared. So as soon as we send our curriculum to a company, there is a robot that understands how many times the keywords that it's looking for are in our CV, and it will decide automatically which curricula will be passed to the company and which ones will be discarded. Okay, so the full process starts and ends into, of course, a specific time frame, and as I said, as simplified today a lot by the usage of robots instead of having people scanning through all these CVs. Okay, so when we do our CV today, it's very important that we think that what we are writing is data. So if we are looking at a job description, we need to make sure that we write something that satisfies what we are learning. We cannot have a classic CV because a robot will decide for us, because the words we write is data. On the transactions we said before, so payments, invoices, travels, all this generates different transactions, and companies are usually managing those through ERP systems, which are the enterprise resource planning systems. Those are usually in large enterprises are provided by big vendors like SAP, Oracle, Microsoft, and stuff. And then there are, of course, tier 2 and 3 for different companies. This normally defines what's the foundation of every company, and on top of this, we start creating our KPIs and building performance. On customers' data, so different companies use, of course, systems called CRM, so the Customer Relationship Management System. This is to make sure that they are able to track all the preferences and critical data of customers, right? We need to know date of birth, gender, family status, phone number, emails, potentially social media accounts. So we can study all the preferences. And this happens not only on CRMs, but companies use a lot of different data. They integrate with social media, they integrate with the web, they have call centers, they launch surveys, and every time we interact with an app, with a survey, on a phone call, we are producing data. And this data then gets processed to make sure that our behaviors are translated into actionable insights for the companies. Okay, so it's very interesting and wide as a concept. And if you want to hear more about this, there is a full section on fan analytics engagement in the sports data master course. On the performance, again, as I said before, it's very important that we are able to give a target to our data, because without a target, there is no reason why we should track it, and there is no drive for any company or for a person in general. So if I'm a sales guy, for example, and I have to sell $1 million in a year, that $1 million as a target has to be in there. So whatever I sell will then be measured against it. So my performance as a sales guy can be measured against a number. The same happens in every other situation at a company. So we need to make sure that whenever we are measuring something, we can have a target against it, so a goal. So if we are measuring speed of a player, we will see it later. Do we have a target? Do we have a benchmark? So can we say it's faster than someone or is lower than someone? This is what companies do and have been done for a long time, right? Am I producing more than my competitors? Am I selling more than my competitors? Did I sell more than last year? Do I have more customers than last year? So when it comes to sports, things change. So I wanted to use a bit of a bridge to move from classic businesses into sports. And I've been thinking about companies that actually have funds, right? Because if I speak to you about an oil and gas company, they don't have funds, right? I mean, they have customers. If I speak to you about some other business that I work with, they don't have funds, they have customers. They have some preferences, but not a fund level. And so I looked at Amazon and I looked at Apple, because those companies really generate funds, right? Not only customers. If you look at Apple, for example, if you have an Apple from day one, if it's your first laptop, if it's your first phone, it's very unlikely that you're going to change it. So some companies get close to customers so much that they make them funds, right? The same that is happening with football teams, right? If you support Barcelona or Real Madrid or Milan or Juventus, you're not going to change it during your life. So this brings me then to look at how then the relationship with customers and funds change for businesses. But let's look at data in sports in general, and then we will reach in there. So sports are very new in data utilization for a certain area, let's say. So I've been working with different sports organizations, and for what concerns the back office, they all work same as other companies. They use ERPs, they have CRMs, they manage everything at the back in the same way that other companies are doing. So they are able to say how much money they are making, they're able to say how much money they're making per type of customer, how much tickets they're selling for season versus punctual one. So this is all happening in there. But what happens, what it's missing now on the sports is looking at the analytics when it comes to the field, okay, or to games or to the pitch. So when we look at the data again in sports, quick recap, the funds big data will help about supporting the brand equity or influencing even now contracts. It's new that the fan base on social media will now influence also the TV rights. Of course, there is sales data, as we said before, is used to look at how many t-shirts we're selling or how many tickets we're selling, and this again as systems. And then the performance happens in different places. If we look at a classic football club, for example, what they do is that they train in the pitch, they train at the gym, they go to the pool, they train in so many different places. They go to the physio, they go to the doctor, they have a nutrition plan, they have a sleeping plan, they do matches or games, and much more, right? They have to stay, they need to check themselves at the dentist, they need to check themselves with nutritionists and so far, so forth. All this generates data, okay? A diet plan and it generates a certain number of calories that someone is eating, right? So the intake of what they're eating has to be above or below their daily basis, their daily burning base, because this will change if they will get bigger or smaller depending on their intake and on the macros that they eat, for instance. So how do we design all this? We have a full way of looking at it, and I will go through that by explaining you the methodology that we use. So again, doing a quick recap, and I don't want to bore you for too long again with the same story as before, but Sports organization again have processes, again have transactions. Instead of customers have funds. And guess what? They also go to B2B and B2C because they have relationship with vendors and they have relationship with big customers that are organizations, and they have customers that are individuals like us, right? That we go to buy the t-shirt, that we go to buy the tickets, and so far, so forth. And then the performance is both on what we say at the back end, but also, and most important, is at the pitch or during matches and games, because this defines and determines then contracts with others and engagement and agreements. So before, for the other industries, we were looking at the flow of data, and now I took the freedom of using the same slide to look at what changes when we go to sport. And guess what? Not that much, right? The only thing that changes is the data sources. Where are we reading when we look at sports that is different than what we read when we are doing another business, right? In this case, I don't need a sensor that looks at the well of an oil and gas plant. I need a sensor on my chest. I need a GPS, right? Or I need a camera in the stadium instead of a camera in a retail shop, okay? So there are certain things that change in terms of naming, if you want, but the structure, the base is still the same. If I can be a bit more technical, there are certain connectors that nowadays are established between data sources and databases, and those are standards. You know, you will hear a lot about JSON, you will hear a lot about XML, RESTful API, and so far so forth. Those are standards, and all the new solutions in the market, also in the sports industry, are now compatible with those. Here, for example, in this slide, I put the GPS. It's difficult to read, but it's a GPS from Fieldwiz. And these guys have a full API for real-time connection and their own portal that connects through 5G or 4G or Wi-Fi and brings the data directly into a platform, and you can connect it, guess what, to anything. You can read it in Excel, you can read it in a database, you can read it from whatever platform you prefer. Then the rest continues, as we said before, up to the visualization. And of course, the prediction now changes as well, right? We said before about the prediction of the injury, but we are looking at different predictions as well, like index of danger of live actions in football. We are looking at the index of fatigue of athletes, depending on how much they train, so their training load and the rest. So how do we design projects? It's important that we specify that designing a performance project and using data in a sports organization is something that has to follow certain steps. We use what is called design thinking, right? So we try to mimic what happens during the day of someone and add the technology to this piece. So if I'm a football player or an athlete, I follow a certain path in here during my day. So in here, what I wrote is about someone that is leaving home, okay, and has received already from his club, his wellness, his nutrition information, his training plan, and he can read from his wearable his sleep monitor, and he has already communicated how he feels to his team, right? He goes all the way through the process. So he will go to the club, he will train, or he will go to the physio, then he will do group training, maybe lunch, afternoon session if there is double session, or just go home if there is one session. So each and every step of those is producing data. So we have created solutions where the football player wakes up in the morning and writes back to the coach with 3 questions, how he feels. Did he sleep well? Does he feel sore? Does he feel injured? With those 3 questions, we are already able to understand if, of course, compared with other data, if the player has to do group training or individual or go to physio or other things. We have the level of hydration, for example. We have the sleep monitor. So there is a lot of data that comes in and helps us. So what we do is taking each and every step and digitalize it. So what we did here was, going into small sets of data. So we looked at a specific piece of the training and we said, okay, this guy is training both at the pitch, then he's changing, he's going to the physio, then he's going to the gym. Okay, so we already know, for example, that training at the pitch is easy to monitor because everybody nowadays in League 1 or 2, sometimes even 3, have GPSs or some cameras. But what happens at the gym is very difficult to monitor because you can get on a treadmill and nobody will know that you were on a treadmill for 5K. Nobody will look at your maximum speed. Nobody will look at your medium speed unless someone comes with a pen or an Excel file and write this down. So how do we get this process smart? How do we change it? And this is the kind of work and the kind of thinking we need to do when we want to have a 360 understanding of data and bring data performance also into sports. So we go into the entire process again and say, okay, what we need to do is make sure that we know that it's a specific player on a specific machine training for a specific time. So what we have put together was a biometric scan on the machines, so that if you go to a treadmill before starting a run, you would scan your veins or your eyes or your fingerprints, and then you would be running for your 5K or 10K, and then leave. So with this type of work, connecting the treadmill to a database and the fingerprint to a database, we were able to then monitor exactly what was happening at the gym. And guess what? The coach finally had more time to give feedback to the player, rather than staying there and trying to track or give subjective assessment. Because imagine if you're running on a treadmill and then you want to get a feedback from your coach, your feedback can give you a subjective assessment, and you as a player can argue with it. But if the coach has the data and can provide you a benchmark and say that you are running slower than yesterday, then this is a tangible type of information that cannot be discussed. So only from that point of view, the only thing that can be discussed is how to overcome this problem and why something is happening. So why were you running slower than yesterday, rather than arguing if you were actually slow or not. So the type of questions when you have data in your hands change. So this is something that we've done to monitor and change things on real time. We've done the same, for example, with the tests. You know that many of the football clubs run tests pre-season, intra-season, and after season. If you want to know who is the fastest guy, we know that many companies use sensors to monitor the top speeds and the high intensity speeds and stuff. But a lot of this was going written manual by someone. Again, doing the same changes, we were able to move from this kind of Excel approach into a more database one. Again, I'm not here to stigmatize or saying that Excel is not a good thing to do, and we will see that can be used. Many people do calculation with that. It's just about making sure that we know that we can integrate more than one data source into a specific single database. So as we said before, and here I'm translating a bit the diagram that we had before with data sources until the end, what we have is that every source has different type of connectors. I mentioned before the XML or the JSON, you can read them here, or the RESTful API. There are, of course, different ones. And these are normally the ones that are used by any company to get their data from their transactional systems, let's say. Once we have this data, then for us it's very important that before we do the integration, we sit with the different people that will use the data. Because, each and every one of them will have a different need. So when I'm sitting with a football club, I need to sit with the coach and understand what he wants to see or she wants to see. I need to sit with the doctors and understand what they want to see. I need to sit with the scout and understand what they want to see. And the same I have to do with the players, okay? Each and every of them will have different needs, and they will have different access to data. The player wants to compare himself with this performance of yesterday, as well as with his colleagues. The coach wants to see how the team is performing as a whole. The scout wants to make sure that people are performing or understanding who to buy and who to sell, right? So there are different business questions that data has to address. So we need to have different personas. So like before we did with the player, that we had the life cycle of what happens from the time he leaves home until he comes back. The same we have to do with each and every different profiles in a football club to better serve them, okay? And then this way we can build mobile applications or portals that will serve them and give them all the reporting and data that they need. I hope this makes sense. We will discuss later in questions. So I will not bother you with this again because it would get it very long, but again, we can go through the type of process data we've seen before, and also in sports. Transactions we've seen as well. So just to recap, on the fans data, again, sports are using the classic CRMs and surveys and social media as others are doing. And the difference with customers that we discussed is that fans are not going to change their football club. So even if they are happy or not, doesn't change the fact that they will still follow the same club. So we have a different mandate than classic companies. We need to make them happy because the retaining it's happening by default. And then the performance data, we've seen that, of course, connects to different data sources that are more close to the specific business and can produce different outcomes depending on the persona that we are targeting, right? So when you want to look at the performance, try to have a wide idea of what happens in your sport. And sorry if I take football, but it's the easiest example that I have and the closest to me because I've been working with different federations and clubs. But what happens is that at the center of the data, when it comes to performance on the pitch, we have the player, right? Is the player that goes to the doctor? Is the player that plays a match? Is the player that does a training? Is the player that is eating something specific? Is the player that is having his sleeping plan and the rest? So the player is our primary key when it comes to linking different events that are happening. So thanks to this, by having a data model that has the player in the middle, in the center of the universe, we are able then to jump from a type of event to another one. Like the injuries, but the training load and the nutrition to see the performance if it's changing with different type of food. But what it's important is that the player stays in the middle of this data model, and we are able to jump from a place A to place B. Okay. So why am I saying all this, and why am I bringing data to the Johan Cruyff Institute, and why I'm creating this course? The reason is that I understand that both businesses and sports have one main objective, right, which is win against the competitors, do better than them, and data brings a difference in there. So it's proven by any other business that a data-driven company always works better than a company that is ignoring data. Okay, ignoring data only works short term because gut feelings is something that can work by talent once, maybe twice, but on the long run, we need to read data, we need to use it. And we see that there is a lot of money revolving around sports. Here I have this slide from Deloitte that tells us a bit about the money around the top 5 leagues in Europe and in the world, actually. So we need to be conscious that the use of data that we do could impact a lot the revenue of a club, can impact a lot the sponsorship of a club, the fan engagement, and of course the performance of the players. Okay. So we need to keep this in mind all the time when we are treating data. So when it comes then to non-professional athletes, so what I wanted to make sure that today we were discussing was something that we could easily bring into our world. I understand that it's a bit utopic thinking of working for an FC Barcelona or Madrid or big clubs, but where can we start? So my starting point has been myself. So I started working on sports analytics in 2015, at the end of 2015, and I've been working on that ever since. And I've been training myself on data analytics for sports. So I've been buying some chip sensors, I've been using wearable devices and stuff to make sure that what I was practicing on myself was actually something that would work at a bigger scale. Okay, so if I was able to rationalize this for myself, then I was automatically able to bring it at a bigger scale. Okay, and vice versa, by the way. So for non-professional athletes, it's also very simple to behave and train as good as a professional athlete when it comes to collecting data and taking decisions using data. Why? Because what we need today, we said it at the beginning, 90% of the data has been produced in the last 2 years. Everybody is using a smartphone today. So we have the possibility of using this cheap technology, if you want, to monitor our own performance. So if I have a smartwatch, like a Fitbit or an Apple Watch or whatever, if I have a smartphone in which I can install my MyFitnessPal, I mentioned before Runtastic or a GPS, and if I have an email and a laptop with Microsoft Office, I can be already nearly as smart as a football club. Okay, of course I cannot do hormonal analysis for performance, but I can do much of what others are doing, the classic Pareto law of 80-20. So in here I was mentioning I have certain data sources, right? And again we come with the diagram we had before. What is it changing? Some names, okay, but the structure of how the data gets treated from the acquisition to the actions is the same. When it comes to non-professional athletes like me, for example, I use a lot of applications that are having easy APIs to read from, like MyFitnessPal. I can log my food every day. I have my goal. If I want to increase my weight or lose weight, I know what I have to eat. I can calculate my macros intake. I can download this data. MyFitnessPal allows me to download this data in CSV format. I can load this into Access, into Excel, or into Tableau, Power BI. There are many solutions that we can use, right? The same I am doing with my heart rate. I have a chest belt. I use a MyZone belt that monitors how I train. And what I'm doing is that I'm using the chest belt during the training and the smartwatch during the rest of the day for reasons of accuracy. This way I know how much I'm burning specifically during a training versus what I burn during a day when I don't train, and I can adapt my food intake, okay? And then I can also look at my performance because I have an application. In this case, I'm using Record, but there is SugarWOD or other ones where I can monitor, for example, how many kind of exercises I've been doing, and if I mix this with how much I've been eating and with my heart rate, and even with my sleep monitor still on the watch, then I can start making sense the same way that we were saying a few minutes ago about a professional football player, right? So we are reaching nearly there by using something that costs nearly to nothing. Let's say it's affordable nearly to everyone, and that can go into different Excels all the way. And Excel here is where I see the power. It can be used as a database and also as a visualization tools to build graphs. And I'm sure that many of you use it. If you're not happy with that, if you want to have more power of visualization and data management, then you can easily download for free, and you can take notes of this or send me an email. You can download Tableau, or you can download Power BI from Microsoft, or you can use cloud solutions like SAP Analytics Cloud or SaaS Analytics. There are many vendors in the market. You can just go and quickly do a research, and you will find something that works. So if I want to conclude in here and try to make a few steps back, what are they then sharing, other businesses and sports? Well, they are sharing the 75% of the back office, right? All the fan engagement or customer management. They are sharing all the transactions piece. They are sharing all that it's happening outside of the pitch. So let's say 75%. And then they're not sharing the piece of the performance, but what they share as a concept is that they want to win against the competitors. And to win, they need to be able to use data in a smarter way than others. Okay, so they need to be able to predict. They need to be able to start using what it's called nowadays machine learning and artificial intelligence. They need to be able to visualize this data in a proper way. They need to be able to clean and keep their data always on point, to be able to take decisions that make sense and are not wrong. So again, using data is then necessary, is not just a nice to have. I was having a conversation with a football coach in 2016, and he was telling me that sport is passion. The sport is not data. He didn't want to see my dashboards. He didn't want to see the applications that I was building. A year and a half after, I had a conversation again with him that was actually very interested on using the data, and that he was understanding all these things that were happening were actually producing this data, as we were saying before. So it's not anymore an option. If you see, the biggest clubs are working with a lot of good players now in the market. I could just mention something, but if you see, for example, Madrid and Barcelona are working with Microsoft on the Global Innovation Sports Center. Yes. The GSIC, and there are many players already even doing some acquisitions and integrations to conquer the market. If you look at the analytics and the data and the video analysis, for example, you have now the two big players with Huddle and Wisecout from one side now. So Huddle, that has both Wisecout and other companies, and the other side you have Stats with Perform and Opta and all the other ones, right? So the market is taking a certain shape, and they're going very hard to make sure that people are using data and can generate this delta distinction between clubs or athletes. So again, very, very quick. So we want to win against competitor, both of us, sports and non-sports. We want to buy and sell more. We want to sell more t-shirts. We want to sell more tickets. We want to sell more scarves, more hats, and more content, same as our other companies. We want to keep our customers happy and engaged. Okay, so this is, as we said before, still staying the same. So with this, I would like to conclude my piece. I think I've been a bit faster than what I was planning, but I would be very happy to have some questions from you and go through all of them. Thank you very much, Lucas. Whenever you're ready, we can start.
All right, Luca. First of all, thank you very much. It was very insightful, but obviously I was expecting this. So I hope that the rest of the guys and all of you that were watching this live and that are going to watch this later enjoy this. I'm sure that in the question section we've already started with some of those. I could see several of those. So let's start with Marco. Marco was asking, analytic on field can be provided by companies like Optasports with a ton of statistics that most people find hard to understand and come up with conclusions. To be honest, those data are nice, but sometimes it's too much and doesn't bring much to the fans' experience. Long contribution.
Yeah,
so let's go step by step.
Yes, so there is a lot of data coming out of those companies. I understand, and they are overwhelming. Normally, what you need to do is trying to rationalize and understand what really makes sense for you, and this is why I was suggesting the design thinking as a very good methodology, right? Because Opta will come to you with 100 KPIs, which automatically are not KPIs, right? They are not key performance indicators if there are too many. So my suggestion is understanding what really drives your club or your business. Sorry again, and rationalize the numbers to the essentials to you, or to the person that is reading and benefiting from this data. This can be done also with some algorithm nowadays. If you use machine learning, you can start using some algorithms like reduction that will slowly understand which data doesn't make sense to have, and only provide the most important one. Something else that I want to add to Marco is that many of the football clubs I'm working with, especially the tier 1, always want to build something that is custom. So they will use those data sources, but then they will ask some providers to customize the visualization, so make it special and tailored on them, so that they don't see all the noise that Marco is mentioning in here. So otherwise, yes, data is nice, but it's too much. It doesn't bring value. Correct.
Right. Let's move on. There are more questions. So okay. Let's continue with Konstantinos. Konstantinos was saying, how do you suggest developing our CV so we can satisfy the ATS system?
Look, I wrote an article recently
okay.
for people of my town. So there are fantastic tools online that now start giving you CVs that are proven or proved for ATS. And then there are websites like topcv.com or topresume.com that will automatically do a scan for you and tell you how good is your CV against the job position. And the first scan is free, then they charge you, so be careful. If you want to pay, it's fine.
Good. All right, let's go with Julian. How do you convince a coach that has not worked before with data to start using it? He will always answer you, hey, I don't have time for that. Do we need to think about training coach data or data coach for every sport?
This is a fantastic question, and the resistance comes a lot. I was giving you the example before about football coach that didn't want to know about data. Actually, met 2 of them that were thinking this way. So some of them will become followers at some point by default. But what is happening in many companies and also in sports organizations is that there is the figure of the chief digital officer or the business relationship manager between IT and the business, let's say, so the coaching team. You need someone that does a bit of coaching, that brings them to that level slowly, step by step. This is a big change management. You're going against someone that has been doing its work and its job forever in a certain way, and you're going now there and changing and telling them to change the way they've been operating. It's like me telling my dad to use Amazon today. I mean, it would take a while before he learns it, right? Maybe he's not open to it, and I need to show him first what I get from it. So there are specific people that do this. This is actually one of the things that I do when I work with clubs. You need people that are techno-functional, so they know both about the business and the technology, and they can make sense to the coaches. What it has to change, and it's mandatory, is that the classic CIO or the IT manager of a football club cannot keep working the way it was working or she was working before. Because, you know, I used to make a joke saying that the CIO or the IT are seen like the Windows guys. No, this is not happening anymore. They need to be more into the business, understanding how the sport is working, and try to bring value through technology and have this relationship management kind of role.
Yeah, I will actually only add to this, because even though I've been out of the analytical business for some time, but still it's like I've been having my share of dealing with coaches, and to be honest, it's like for some of them it was so difficult to accept the technology could accept them, to help them to do perhaps some kind of better job. But the thing is that once they get used to it, they started to recognize the importance of the technology, of different tools that they've been using, and they were even calling them by names and like having them as a member of their team, even though we were speaking about some kind of tool like let's call it Wisecout, or let's call it whatever it was. So for them, it was suddenly they just started to realizing like, whoa, this is part of my team. And the switch was difficult, but once you achieve this, like you said, with people that are always willing to, and are technological friendly and are users, it's definitely easier to convince a coach that because if the coach has to do it, sometimes it's very difficult. But if he or she has a team around him or her that is going to help him or her, it's definitely easier.
Yeah.
All right, let's continue with more questions, because there are still a lot. So where we were? Oh, Zaim. Yeah, it's Zaim. What type of data analytic tools does professional football clubs use to analyze the on-field performance? Are there any specific brands or software available?
Tons. The market is very big. There are big players and small players in this. So the Wisecout that we said before, so Huddle is one of them. Stats is the other one. There is Instat having some cameras as well. There is Smartabase with Fusion Sport. There are many players in the market that are doing this. In the slides, I was using a small Danish company that is called Vio. They're actually selling some very nice smart cameras that do 3 different recording at once. So 180 degrees of the pitch, following the ball by itself, and then monitoring the goals. So you can also look at inactive balls by moving the cameras wherever you want, while the cameras at the same time is monitoring what happens with the ball. So there are many players in the market. If you will come in the course, I will be mentioning a few of them, and I can also provide contacts if you're interested, because I'm in very good terms with both Huddle and Stats.
Yeah, all right. That was about the big players. Let's continue. Alexandru is basically asking, data is really important, but I think we don't have to exclude human part from here. How important do you think is coach's job, analyzing data and communicating with the players?
Look, what we want to do is support the coach, right? We don't want to create a digital coach that can exclude the coach. I mean, sports is sports. So there is a piece of talent that we still have to capture by ourselves. There is still that instinct that has to go in there. But data, it's something that has to support that instinct, because sometimes you're wrong. And data unfortunately is not wrong. So data will be supporting the coaches, and the communication with players, as I said before, will change. It's not that they will have a less conflictual or more conflictual conversation. The type of questions, the type of conversation will change to a complete different level. because you will be analyzing a performance that is tangible, and you will be looking at a number and say, hey, we need to bring you from 7 to 8 on certain things. So there is a different type of question that will happen. So of course we don't have to exclude the human part. I agree with you. I had actually a very long conversation on a local TV in Italy over Christmas where a scout was telling me this, and I agree. Absolutely, we don't want to change to substitute anyone. It's not the intention of data.
Okay, continuing a little bit with the data, Harvik is asking, in your experience, let's say on a scale from 1 to 10, how much do you think performance data analytics done by football clubs actually affect the performance of their players in the matches?
Well, the performance of the player in the match is affected by the player itself. So I can predict it. I can give you a prediction. I can analyze it and look at the past. But if the player that day decides not to play, that's a problem, and I cannot really do much. So of course, if the world is perfect and we just go by the book, I would say that the data brings that change between the good and the excellent, right? So if you're aiming to excellence, then you need to use data. If you don't use data, you can be good. I don't think you can reach excellence nowadays when you're comparing yourself as a player against people of the caliber of Messi or Ronaldo or Dybala or these kind of players. That it's not possible.
All right, continuing a little bit, Ulrich is asking, what sort of capex do you envision the clubs will need to spend on this over the upcoming years compared to players, staff, etc., etc.?
Okay, I will answer in two ways. Number one, it's not that high. Depending on the tier of clubs, the pricing changes very much. And actually, I have to say that many of the solutions that are in there are on OPEX. So they actually go on subscriptions. On the CAPEX, which means then the implementation or the one-off licenses of what clubs have to buy. Look, I've seen projects ranging in between $500,000 and $1.5 million, depending on how crazy you want to go. Compare that with the budget of a football, it's nothing, but we are changing the perception from are good at spending money with players versus clubs that are good also spending money with technology.
Okay, how are you holding up, Luca? Because we are still many questions.
I'm good. I'm having fun.
Good, that's very important. So Cheyenne is asking, if you want to get more involved with team or player analytics as a career, are there specific qualifications you need? Specific master, totally in data analytics? I see somebody's looking for another career.
I like the question, and I will answer it this way. Look, I've been trying to enter the sports sector for a while, just because I was working on sports data analytics, and I thought I could simply apply to a company and join, right? Guess what? It didn't work. Maybe because I didn't do the CV ATS proof. But what really boosted my LinkedIn and my inbox, I have to say, is the completion of the master that I've done here at the Cruyff Institute. I started getting offers immediately right after when I said that I finished. So I would honestly suggest you to go through the master, and then, as I said to your colleagues in the Spanish in webinar, the best way to start a career in analytics is by suffering. So getting into a company at a junior position, learn how that works, and then grow up in there.
Yeah, all the way up. Sometimes it's difficult, but like you said, it's sometimes.
I only know the old way, you know. I don't know any other way.
Okay, let's continue with Badr. For a sports studio or gym, how can you utilize data to promote, market your place?
I love the question, and Badr, if you're in Dubai, we can open it together. So what I've done was this. So I'm using a belt that is called My Zone, and this immediately gives real-time analysis of what is happening during the training, and I can compare myself with others in terms of heart rate, for example, and see who's suffering the most. But then, of course, what you need to do, Badr, I think, is that, of course, you need to promote certain things like heart rate monitors. be good on calculating the real KPIs behind those. I have this in the course, by the way. So, for example, calories burned, or food intake, or sleep monitor, and offer this to your members. So, if your members will have a tailored program based on how much they can sleep, on their lifestyle, on their food intake, and on their performance, then it would be fantastic. What I've done with some of my friends at the gym was also buying some easy sensors. I bought a sensor from Texas Instruments. There is an accelerometer, for example, and I connect it to barbells. And this allows me to understand how much horsepower I am developing with an arm instead of another, or a leg instead of another, and how I behave with different weights and a different work intensity. So there are plenty of ways you need to be creative.
Okay, let's go back to football, because Alex is interested in which kind of data football clubs are using the most nowadays. Data helpful to optimize and drive the sport performance, or data helpful to drive personalized solution to consumers, hence to increase sales?
Look, I work mainly on performance. So on the pitch, I worked with the Qatar Football Association, so through Aspire Academy. We did a full data performance platform for football and for individual sports. So they are using a lot of data from GPSs and cameras and stuff, as we said before. I work with the Italian football national team, with the FIGC, and same. Actually, they are doing much more than that. They are analyzing 360-degree what happens with their players. I'm in touch with other clubs that I cannot mention other than, like in France, I'm working with Clermont Foot 63, a Ligue 2 football club that is using, for example, mostly match analysis, training, and medical analysis they do as well. But for example, they don't go that deep on nutrition as they do on the Italian Federation. But they do scouting in a much wider way, for example. I work with Austria Lustenau, that is doing very similar as Clermont, because it's also a second league club. So there are different ones, and they use data. All of them are starting to get in there. Depending on the level of maturity and budgets that they have, they do more or less things. Normally, they start with training and match analysis, and then they start expanding into the rest.
I would just add to this from the other point of view, because obviously he was also focusing on data to help drive a personalized solution to customer and consumers. Obviously, this is related with specifically fan engagement, and with the fact how the clubs are trying to get their consumers a little bit better and try to personalize and tailor-make all the offers they are doing. So I would say, like, these are completely two different things. One is the data, like Luca was explaining, on the pitch, and then is the data that they could work with to obviously boost your sales, like Alex mentioned. And this is obvious nowadays. More and more clubs are completely focusing on this and are working more and more in a way to use the data to work with their fans and with their customers.
Yeah, if you go online, there are many examples of how NFL or NHL are doing this, with promotions live during the matches based on the preferences of their fans. So there are a lot of business cases that you can analyze.
Absolutely. Or if you want, you could also sign up for another course that we have that is related to fan engagement.
Yeah.
And you will see me there. All right, Fadi, let's move on. In terms of tracking athletes' lifestyle, the data might be pretty much accurate, but it is not the case in customer analysis. Is there a specific margin percentage of discrepancies? If yes, what will it be in regards to the lifestyle of athletes and customer analysis?
Look, there is an easy answer to this, which says everything and nothing. So we are not predicting the success of a doctor operation. So we can take the time to learn. We can let our models getting better as much as they get the data, and we can let our models learn. So when you want to look at how your customers behave, you have certain places where you can get the data, right? You have their social media accounts, you have the interaction that they give you, maybe through email, if they click on your links, if they open your links, You can see what they do on your e-commerce, if they buy tickets or t-shirts or stuff. So there are certain things that you can analyze, and you can also do a sentiment analysis on social media to understand their level of happiness. Their lifestyle can be more or less predicted, but of course, I mean, the margin of error, it's not something that I could give you as a percentage now. It all depends on how much data you ingest, how much history you have. Okay, it cannot be done in a day or two.
Okay.
Luca, do you want to add anything, or you think it's okay?
No, it's okay. It's okay. Let's move on, because we are still having several questions, and I think more still coming. So they always mention it is hard to measure whether a sponsorship was worth it. Do you have any ideas how the data can be used to measure the impact of sponsorship? Well, we are good right now.
This is a fantastic one, very complex. I think that there was a webinar on this, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Sponsorship done with Pep Guardiola. You did it, right? I think it was like a few days back, maybe. Yeah. So I mean, there are other webinars dedicated to this being running as we speak those days. So I mean, data is of course impacting the sponsorship, and as we said before, we need to look also at the customer behavior and the fan base through social media. It's something that is becoming fairly new. I've seen this year, for example, the TV rights being associated to fan base, and this is used in companies like, and reports like the ones from a company in Italy called Equi.com. Sorry. So I don't have a specific idea now. I will have to come back to you on the way to measure the impact. But of course, we have all the instruments. We can look at the fan engagement. We can look at the fan base. We can look at all the interactions. We can look also at the revenue that comes from this in a club and measure it against the money that we pay for a sponsorship, right? And then understanding, for example, how many people are clicking on the website coming from a link that comes from a sponsor, and this kind of analysis. So there are many things that can be done. So SEO analysis on the websites, on the e-commerce, and social media, and sentiment analysis, and so forth, so forth. Very, very wide as a.
Let's move on. Wilco is asking, esports is growing exponentially the last years, but for data, there are some constraints: money, time, knowledge. What is needed to help the use of data to grow?
Oh, look, we need to start we need to start small. Esport is growing and is booming, and I'm actually not that happy to see that it didn't reach the level I was expecting now under the coronavirus. I was hoping to see the esports leagues taking over and maybe have some, taking over also some TVs. Lucas, to be honest, I was hoping to see, DAZN or Sky to start showing some esports for the fans and promote this a bit more during the COVID. And I hope that this will ring a bell to someone and make this happen, because this would have reduced for sure the loss of money on the sponsorship that is not realizing due to the stop of the leagues. What is needed to help, man? To bring more money to the esports, it has to keep growing. You need more sponsors, you need more visibility, you need more fans, and then the use of data can also explode. At the moment, I would suggest, there are many different solutions that are fitting the purpose and they don't cost that much. So this analysis can be done and be used to monitor the performance. But I am sure 100% that this will come with, similar to Y Scouts or Instat or Optas, this will come, and it's actually easier to monitor because esports is already data, right? You don't have to do anything new. You just have to collect what is happening in there and produce the reports.
Yeah, you're right. I was also expecting a little bit more from the esports and in these things, but
didn't keep gear fast enough.
Yeah. So yeah, right now I think I would just completely welcome to the possibility to watch some real football behind the closed doors. I would love it, actually. Anyway, let's move on. Zoltan, Zoltan is our student from the postgraduate in football business. Hey Luca, is there a software already on the market which works with scores like XG, XGOT, XA, and similar likes?
So now there is a problem, and the problem is that I'm not that technical to go into the KPIs that is asking for. What I can tell you is that when you want to monitor scoring that are not in classic tools, nowadays the most used solution are Python and R, or there are software that are allowing to build advanced analytics models in a fancy way and actually interesting. I just shift my job to SAS, which does AI and advanced analytics at the finest. So maybe you can look at that, assuming you work for a company that has the budget to go through a tier 1 vendor.
All right, let's go with Konstantinos. I think his question is more related with his work on his final master project, but how can we use the data analytics for other areas of the lab, such as the CSR? Many times it is difficult to quantify results, so we can analyze or evaluate them. Do you have something to suggest when it comes to quantifying such results?
Look, it goes back to doing some analysis as we did before for the player that arrives at the club and spends his day, right? So we need to look at the functional process and understand whatever is producing data in that process. I mean, if our CSR is specific to, I don't know, building this, we need to understand if we have deadlines, if we are looking at certain attendance, what's the impact we are looking around. So we need to ask ourselves why we are doing this CSR, and the why is automatically, to me, the answer that has to be translated into data. So goals are in there. So the CSR normally is trying to reach a certain goal, right? If you're doing a crowdfunding, you want to reach a certain amount, right? So this way, you know, if you're getting X amount of money versus what you were targeting, you're not reaching the goal. So to me, it all goes to the questions that you ask yourself and do some design thinking to be able to translate the functional process into technology and quantify it.
Okay, let's go with Matej. He's asking, recently we've seen some really good players coming to the biggest teams that were not able to fulfill the club's or fans' expectations. What are the options of teams to test players on their emotional toughness?
I love it. This is a fantastic question. So yeah. Thanks, Matej. So scouts are doing this already. Sometimes I look at the scout of Clermont, that is a friend, the head scout, and he tells me what he's looking at. And often you can have a fantastic player, but it doesn't fit the team with his character. This is already happening. And if you pay attention to what happens in the gaming sector, is that if you look at how a player behaves in FIFA or in Pro Evolution Soccer, you will see that how the way he celebrates or the way he gets nervous after missing a shot and stuff. These all are characteristics that can be monitored. Nowadays, this is done through machine learning processes like deep learning. You can look at the face and recognize the expressions. This is done already by our iPhones or by Facebook, you know. So there are a lot of things that can be learned by technology that can then be used by scouts and understand if a player fits or not from a character point of view. So yeah, it's happening. It's absolutely in there.
Yeah, even though it's happening, obviously we are still based in the decision of the scouts and their own assumptions. So obviously it's still happening that sometimes the player, even though you've been checking his emotional part, his mental health, and etc., you still don't know what you are buying sometimes, and they react completely differently once they are in a complete different social group or different social groups within the team. So those are the variables that you have to play with.
Look, we do this. I've been doing this in Clariba for many years. When I was hiring a person in my team, I was also sending to them a personality assessment, classic questions, and I would actually suggest you to try the Wings Finder of Red Bull, which is a free personality assessment. And you hire someone that fits the parameters that you're looking for, but as Luca said, then anything can happen. But in general, those things work.
Yeah. Let's move on. Pantel is asking, what do you think is happening in the market with data collection from sports fans in stadiums? Don't you think, for example, a football club should do more in capturing data of their fans in the stadium and based on this data, provide them with tailor-made services in the stadium? Well, this would be
they do, and Lucas has a full course on this.
Yeah.
So they do. They know all we do, right? They know what we buy. They know where we press like. We know when we download the apps and how we use the apps. So this is all in there. And plus, stadiums now are smart stadium using IoT, suggesting things automatically, understanding everything about us. So this has been done. Data is being captured for fun benefits and for the clubs to propose something that makes sense, that is tailored to people's desires.
More and more clubs are definitely looking to explore this and looking for ways to know even better than perfectly, their own customers, their own fans, divide them into different profiles in order to tailor-make exactly what they need. Doesn't matter if you're speaking about ticketing or any kind of offers and services the clubs are giving to the fans. They just want to know them as much as possible and to give them the best they could. And this is really happening. Again, this is happening in the top leagues. Once we are just going down and we are going to different leagues, there is still a huge gap, but the clubs are working on this and are getting better at this.
Correct.
All right, Alexandru, I'm very interested on the subject and I am in the point to start my own app. Good luck. Regarding data analysis in basketball, I have some more questions. Oh, basically, well, Alexandru, I think you have right now on the main screen, you have the contact on Luca. So if you want to contact him,
write to me or add me on LinkedIn or both. Do both, but write to me on this email. And I suggest you also to go on .tableau.com and look for the content built by Daniel Theo, which is a good friend of mine from Netherlands, that has built a specific dashboard on basketball where he's analyzing the areas of shots of different players, and he also built a very, very nice tribute dashboard recently. So you can have a look.
All right, let's go with Arnab. Competition results are often hosted by International Sports Federation in PDF Excel formats or directly in their websites. This makes data extraction for multi-year, multi-sports results difficult. Are there tools to provide easy data extraction of publicly sourced data for analysis?
Look, this is a very interesting one, and I am providing data from 2016 to 2020 in our data analytics course. I will give you a hint in here. Of course, there are companies now trying to scrape all those websites like Transfer Market and stuff, but it's not that easy. If you go and want to look for a free data source, you can look at sofifa.com, sofifa.com. They have some nice statistics about all the players from 2016 until now.
All right. Let's go with Leonidas. What is your opinion on the Moneyball type data analysis systems, expected goals, philosophy, etc., etc.?
Look, this is also happening. When I talk with Wisecout, I know that this is another line of business completely. People buy data, for example, betting companies do, right? They need this data because this is how they base their betting percentages and what they are willing to pay to people. So this is happening. I have an opinion, and the opinion is that it's there. It's been always there in a way or another. My dad used to play the Toto Calcio when I was a kid. He was trying to guess what things were happening. I have to say that having a smart system today makes it a bit more complex for people to maybe to win or to make the big money. But it makes sense also because this is now also helping the fight against corruption when it comes to unpleasant situation happenings in matches or games.
All right, I think we are done with the question. We were done with the questions, but Nuno is coming. Nuno is our former student in the Master in Football Business at FC Barcelona. So what is your opinion on Brentford's player trading strategy?
Nuno, send me an email in 2 days so I will be able to read it and give you an answer. I don't have an opinion yet.
And before also Toby was posting a question regarding the fans of an athlete on social media. How could we analyze the results of the contents other than the likes, comments, clicks on a link, for example?
Yes, so there are different connectors in the market now that do a lot of different KPIs. And what I would suggest is that you go to the developer page of these different social medias, for example, Facebook, and you will see all the KPIs that they calculated now. So they will give you the formulas. And this way you can calculate many more KPIs just than looking at likes and comments and clicks. You can look at much more analytics. Something that I've seen also when I was starting with this is looking at some web pages where they suggest the top 10 or top 20 social media KPIs, and you can of course look at this and look at the formulas.
All right, Arnab is asking again because about the data extraction, he was mostly referring to the Olympic sport. So years of data is analyzed to arrive at some benchmarks for Olympic medal standards at our end.
I don't think you will find this data. Look, I've been working with Aspire Academy, as I was mentioning before, and you know they have Mutas, that is the guy that is a champion at the Olympics, the first silver medal that I remember when a few years back at the Olympics, and this data is kind of private. It's very difficult to get performance data of a player published also because you need to consider that, for example, in Europe, you have the GDPR data protection, right? You cannot just expose data of your athletes outside. That doesn't really work. You can only look at the results of previous competitions, but for sure, you cannot look at their training data or their development of career.
All right, I think we are good to go. First of all, before I will even say all the best and etc., guys, seriously, Luca mentioned it before, but on Monday, 13th of April, we are just starting completely brand new module, which this guy created. If you're interested, you could check on our website, cruyffinstitute.com, more information about the course data analytics. And yeah, it would be great if you will sign up, because obviously you will be able to learn much more, because this was just a small sneak peek on what you will find in the course. In the meantime, if you will follow our social media channels, specifically Facebook, you will find out more about the upcoming webinars. So hopefully we will see you there. And most importantly, guys, stay safe, stay strong, because the situation is difficult, it's tough, but obviously we will go through this. So Luca, it's been a huge pleasure, like always. Thank you very much for your time, for this session, and stay in touch. All the best, guys. Take care, and
ciao, bye-bye.
Ciao.